Chapter 1: The Mail Wagon. The child arrived in a mail wagon one late afternoon in early spring. Bill Remmer had been planting rose seedlings all day when she approached, eyes wide and cautious. "Are you Mr. Bill Remmer?" she asked, her precise pronunciation strangely formal. "I am," he replied, brushing dirt from his clothes as he removed his straw hat. The shadow lifted from his weathered face, and the child swallowed hard an expected reaction to his gruff appearance. "And who are you?" "Hello, Uncle Bill, I'm Layla Llewellyn. I came from Lovita." Her clear voice startled him. That explained the odd accent. "You crossed the border alone?" "Yes. I rode the train." She tried to stand taller, forcing a smile. The mailman who had accompanied her stepped forward. "She was wandering by the station. Said she was looking for Bill Remmer, gardener of the Herhart estate. Since I was heading here anyway, I brought her along." He handed Bill a letter worn and hastily sealed. Bill opened it on the spot. A relative from Lovita explained that Layla was now orphaned and, due to financial hardship, they could no longer care for her. If Bill couldn't take her in, she should be placed in an orphanage. Bill's face darkened. "Damned people, they sure let me know fast." The letter felt more like a warning than a request. They'd passed the girl along like unwanted baggage, shipping her to a stranger in another country with only a name and address. "Uncle Bill," Layla spoke softly. "I'm not that young. I'll be 12 soon." Her mature tone caught him off guard. She was small for her age, fragile as a reed, but her pride burned steady in those green eyes. Once the mailman left, silence fell in the garden. Bill rubbed his temples, muttering curses. 20 years had passed since he'd last seen those relatives, and now here was a child, his distant kin, dropped on his doorstep like a stray. She wore threadbare clothes despite the chill and looked half-starved. The only vivid things about her were her golden hair and bright green eyes. Bill felt overwhelmed. He couldn't care for a child, but the thought of sending her to an orphanage twisted something inside him. "Follow me," he said at last, shaking his head. "Let's eat first. I'll decide after." As they walked toward his cabin, her tiny steps began to bounce, just slightly, hope peeking through the cracks. "Is that all you're going to eat?" Bill asked, frowning at the small portion the girl dished onto her plate. "Yes, I only eat a little." "Really?" she replied, smiling. Bill grew slightly more frustrated than he already was. "Listen, kiddo, I hate kids with small appetites." The girl's eyes widened at this harsh comment. He had pulled up her sleeves, exposing her slender wrists to the light shining down from the table lamp. "No matter what, you're starved. You should eat lots, like a cow," he said. His face grew more stern. For a moment she started into space, blinking slowly as she considered his words. Then she took another piece of meat and slice of bread and placed them on her plate, then started sacrificing them voraciously, making it seem like she had been quite hungry after all. "Maybe I can't quite eat like a cow, but I am a good eater, Uncle," she said, smiling at him with her breadcrumb-covered lips. "Yes, I can see that clearly now," he replied, chuckling as he took a sip of liqueur. "Aren't you afraid of me?" he then asked, intentionally making an intense grimace as he looked at her. However, she simply stared right back at him, not flinching or avoiding his gaze for a moment. "Nope," she replied. "You never yelled at me. You gave me all this delicious food. I'm grateful for those things. You seem like a good person." What kind of life she was leaving before this, that such simple things make her grateful? He wondered. These gave him a bitter taste in his mouth, so he stood up and poured himself a large glass of beer. The letter has stated that the girl's mother had run away with another man, abandoning her daughter and her father. Her father had been so distraught by these that he became an alcoholic and ended up dying of alcohol poisoning. After that, the girl has been passed from relative's home to relative's home. Pondering over all this, Bill realized that her life had been far from easy. Even so, he still thought it was out of the question for him to be the one to raise her. As he swigged his beer, decided that he would make his decision by next week. Did everyone hear? Bill Remmer, the gardener, has started taking care of a young girl. A maid dashed into the lounge where the Herhart servants rested. The room, once filled with idle chatter, turned silent. "A girl? Mr. Remmer?" It'd make more sense if he took in a lion. Everyone chuckled. Bill Remmer, the Herhart family's gardener for 20 years. Bill lived simply gardening, drinking, and retreating to solitude. Was a gruff man known more for his talent with flowers than for kindness. His temper was legendary, yet his skill kept him employed and even favored by the Duchess, Norma Herhart. She adored flowers as much as he did and gave him a secluded cottage behind the manor. After his wife's death, he never remarried, so the idea of him raising a child? Unthinkable. That is, until one of the maids by the window gasped, "Oh my, it's true! Look!" Everyone rushed to the window. Outside, bent over his flower bed, was Bill Remmer, and trailing behind him, a tiny girl with golden braids swaying like a pendulum. When asked, Bill only said, "I haven't decided. I can't leave her anywhere, so I'm thinking." Through spring and into summer, Leyla Llewellyn remained, becoming a fixture of the Herhart estate. Her quiet strolls among flowers became a familiar sight. "She's grown," remarked Madame Mona, the chef, watching Leyla admire blooms near the forest cottage. "Still small," Bill muttered. "Children aren't like plants, Bill. They don't grow overnight." Mona shook her head and placed a basket on the table. "What's this?" "Leftovers from yesterday's tea party. Cookies and cake. They're for Leyla." Bill scowled, but couldn't deny the child was becoming part of life here. Servants had taken to greeting her, bringing food, even visiting her. "You should get her new clothes. That skirt's about to fly off her knees," Mona added. As if on cue, Leyla chased a bird and, in a blink, climbed up a tree like a squirrel. "She's good at climbing," Bill said, unbothered. "Bill Remmer, you knew she does that and didn't stop her? How are you raising her?" "As you can see, she's strong and growing. Like a wild beast," Mona cried, storming off. Bill watched silently as Leyla perched on a thin branch, studying birds. Over months, her curiosity had become clear, fascinated by flowers, insects, and every corner of the natural world. One night, when she didn't return for dinner, Bill found her by the river, so lost in watching water birds she didn't hear him calling. That was the first time he worried like a father. Later that week, as he walked toward the cottage, "Get ready," Bill said suddenly. "We're going to town. You need new clothes." "Why?" Leyla blinked. "The Duke's arriving soon. Can't meet him like that." "The Duke? The owner of this estate?" "Yes. He's on break from school." "Wait, the Duke goes to school? He's 18. Still a kid like you." "What? 18? Bill laughed at her shocked face, brushing a hand through her messy hair. It felt soft like cotton. At the Carlsbad station, a train from the capital had arrived on the platform. The waiting servants made their way to the station's private section. A tall, slender boy descended onto the platform by the time they lined up in a straight line. "Hello, master." All the other servants quickly bowed their heads towards the boy, starting with the butler Hessen's friendly greeting. Matthias replied to their greetings with a light yet silent gesture in a straight and elegant manner. His rosy lips were curved into a smile that was neither too wide nor too stiff. The Herhart's servants didn't start moving until Matthias took a couple of moves. "A carriage?" Matthias smirked as he left the station and spotted a carriage waiting for him. "Ah, yes, master. Madam doesn't believe cars are trustworthy." "I know. For grandmother, cars are nothing more than a hunk of iron that is unbearably vulgar and dangerous. My apologies. Next time." "No, classic things are not bad." Once in a while, Matthias boarded the carriage in a composed manner. Slow but steady movements flowed from his long arms and legs. As it passed through the busy shopping streets and the square, the carriage consistently picked up speed. Matthias' luggage was transported in a separate wagon, which trailed behind the carriage engraved with a golden crest off into the distance. Chapter 2. A beautiful bird slayer. Matthias sat in the back of the carriage, staring out of the window. His butler, Hessen, briefed him about the pending problems of his family. He responded to Hessen's words with just quick nods or brief replies. The business was run by the directors, and although Matthias' mother and grandmother were in charge of the family affairs, it was up to him as the Duke of Herhart to make the final decision. Matthias had been playing that role since he was a child of 12. Hessen's report had ended by the time Matthias arrived on the Platanus road leading to the Herhart estate. Matthias was seated with his head tilted at an angle, gazing at the familiar scenery. Both sides of the roadway were lined with tall trees that were arched as if they were holding hands. The path was embroidered with an exquisite pattern designed by the shattered sunlight, leaping through the fluttering leaves. A white mansion with a blue-colored rooftop revealed itself after passing through the road into the estate. Outside the front entrance, grandmother were waiting for their family patriarch. The door to the wagon opened as Matthias straightened the position of his already linear tie. "Welcome home, Matthias." Norma Katharina von Herhart, Dowager Duchess of Arvis, smiled brightly when she welcomed her grandson. Matthias bowed his head and accepted a kiss from his grandmother. He was approached with a much more straightforward attitude by Elsie von Herhart, his mother, who stood behind them. "You've grown taller," she chuckled as she embraced him warmly. Her dark black hair gleamed in the early summer light, much like her son's. Matthias responded to his mother with the same smile. He shared similar greetings with the other servants in line. His polished manner and proper courtesy towards the servants showed that he was the perfect owner of this family. He was Duke Herhart. Matthias took the lead and crossed the lobby area. Standing between his two beloved women, he suddenly lifted his head and stared up at the huge chandelier that was lit up in the middle of the day before climbing the stairs. He was a Herhart. Herhart, a euphemism for intellect, grace, and unflappable character. Matthias had never had any complaints or concerns regarding his own life. He was well aware of the kind of life he would have to live and accepted it. Handling his own life was as easy as breathing for him. Matthias ascended the stairwell with long strides with his eyes fixed on the ground. The servants were finally able to breathe properly after the owner of the household entered the mansion safely. The residents of Arvis had been preparing for days to meet Duke Herhart in person. On his arrival, everything and everyone, including the people who lived in his estate, had to be flawless. The servants needed to present themselves in the best light possible. Did the Duke already arrive? Standing at the edge of the group of servants, Leyla murmured something in a disappointed tone. The creamy white-color dress Bill had purchased for her flapped in sync with her movements. "You'll see Duke Herhart in the woods, but I have to ask for permission first." Bill Remmer spoke bluntly and began walking towards the woods. Leyla followed him at the back with zeal. "Does the Duke enjoy the woods as much as I do?" "Well, yeah, sure. Hunting is one of his favorite activities." "Hunting? In the woods?" Layla's pupils dilated and her eyes widened. As he looked down at the child, Bill snorted. "Isn't it natural for the forest to be the hunting ground for this family? Then, does he hunt birds too?" "Upland hunting is the Duke's favorite pastime." His irrelevant comment caused Leyla to halt in her stride. Bill coughed reflexively after realizing what he had said. He tried lying to her to convince her, but Duke Herhart was due to arrive on the hunting grounds in a few days. He was concerned that if he tried to comfort the child with his white lies, he would cause Leyla even more distress. "When you see the Duke's shooting skills, you'll be astonished. He's only a teenager, but he's a fantastic sharpshooter." Bill started to babble, because he felt compelled to say something to comfort the young girl. But Leyla, on the other hand, was on the verge of crying. Why does he like killing birds? There's lots of food in the mansion. Hunting is merely a means of recreation for the nobles. The most entertaining targets to shoot are birds, and Bill turned around to face Leyla after realizing what he had said, and Layla's upset expression came into his gaze. "Why do you like birds so much?" Bill was on the verge of yelling something at the top of his lungs. He didn't understand why he was bothering to explain something to her, while still having to be sensitive to the child's feelings. Bill eventually chose to remain silent because Leyla seemed to be about to cry if he said even one more word. The sobbing Leyla. He hated seeing children crying. Bill continued to walk again after a brief pause. Layla's shoulders were limp as she followed in his footsteps. The same child who had been excited to wear her new ivory-colored dress was gone. It had been quite a sight to see her feeling so agitated about the dress she just received. "I'm hoping the Duke shows a dislike for hunting." After a long period of silence, she spoke up cautiously. "Or maybe he'll get tired of hunting." Leyla looked up at Bill, her eyes sparkling with hope. But Bill could only scratch the back of his neck sheepishly as a response. Leyla was optimistic that her prayers would be fulfilled. Matthias was nowhere to be found near the hunting grounds a week after his return. He was busy tending to the guests who had flocked to the mansion to see him, so it was understandable. The mansion was filled with clamorous parties every day, but the woods were deafeningly quiet. As the summer had come to an end, the eggs hatched, and the wild roses, which had been in the early stages of flowering, were now wholly bloomed. Layla was enthralled by the minor changes taking place in the woods. "Layla, don't go too far." Bill raised his voice when Layla excitedly left the cottage. "All right, I'm just going for a stroll along the river. Uncle, I'll see you later." As she turned around, Layla swung her arms frantically above her head. Her old leather bag, which she slung over her shoulder, shook along with her as she jumped. Layla was the first person to discover the newly hatched birds on a tree branch. The hairless baby birds were eagerly awaiting their mother's arrival with their food. She scampered down from the tree and drew the picture of the baby birds on a scrap of paper, which she pulled from her leather bag. Although her sketches were a little messy, she tried her hardest to portray the tiny birds in her drawings. In her little diary, Layla drew and wrote about everything she had seen in the woods. The land was more majestic than any other location she had ever seen. Layla decided to jot down everything she saw. This was because she wanted to look back on her memories from the woods in her diary. After her departure from this mansion, she was saddened by the thought of leaving the place one day. Layla kept a steady record of the forest. The sun was just starting to settle when she arrived at the glistening riverbank. Layla climbed to the peak of a giant tree that stood at the forest's edge, overlooking the river. A faint clink of horseshoes could be heard from afar when Layla held her breath while hugging the tree branch she was lying down on. On its back there was a man. He chose to rest his horse right under the tree, where Layla was lying among all the places in the woods. From the moment that man had stepped off the horse, his movements had been smooth and light. She thought it best to climb down, but the mysterious man was already leaning against the tree. Layla couldn't think of anything else to say, so she just looked at the man who was lifting his hand to remove his hat. But at that moment, Layla's leather bag fell off her shoulders and slammed into the branch. For the next few seconds, her memory became hazy. The man reflectively turned his head towards the tree branch and met eyes with Layla. Layla locked her gaze with his. His blue eyes were like clear glass beads, visible through the thick black hair that flowed over his forehead. By the time she tried to gather herself together, the man was already pointing his gun at her face. The thought of being shot by the long, menacing gun made Layla's face turn pale. She remained motionless, hugging the tree as though it were her only friend. Her entire body was trembling with sweat. Slowly, the man lowered his pistol and let out a silent sigh. "Who are you?" His twisted lips emitted a low, resonant voice. "Layla." As her golden hair fluttered in the wind, Layla managed to keep her voice from breaking, even though she was on the verge of tears. "What?" His pupils dilated even further, and Layla hugged the tree so tightly that it hurt her fingertips. "Layla, I'm Layla Llewellyn. Uncle Bill." The sound of Layla's cry echoed through the woods. Bill sat in front of his cottage warehouse, watching the sun setting down. At Layla's frantic call, he turned his head in bewilderment and looked at Layla, who ran towards him with a crimson-red face. "What's the matter?" "There's a man in the woods. He was very tall. His hair was jet black, and his eyes were a deep shade of blue. His voice sounded as light as a feather." Bill smirked with a snarl. "Without a doubt, it's Duke Herhart." Layla stood in front of Bill, trying to catch her breath. For a while, the stunning yet scary man in the distance had stared at Layla, and then turned away without saying anything. When he mounted his horse again, two more men appeared in the dense forest. The man turned his horse and followed the other two men further into the woods. When they were no longer visible, bang! A cold shot suddenly rang out. Startled, Layla turned her head towards the source of the noise. She soon witnessed surprised birds arising from the far side of the woods. One of the birds fell from the trees, with its wings drooped helplessly. The shots went on for a couple more rounds, so Bill patted Layla on her shoulder to comfort the frightened child. Everyone in the estate, including Bill Remmer, praised him for being the epitome of royalty. Matthias von Herhart, who had exceptional qualities as the owner of this duchy, seemed to be loved and cared for by the people. But not Layla. The mother bird had been missing since the day the Duke went out hunting. The newly hatched baby birds were separated from their mother, who fed them with food. Moreover, countless birds were no longer to be seen in the woods. Why did the Duke only hunt the tiny, beautiful birds instead of big, edible ones? Layla, who had been watching and agonizing over this for the past month, seemed to have figured out why. For Duke Herhart, the birds had become his moving target. The smaller they were, the more challenging and fascinating it was to shoot them. The Duke didn't even try to glance at the prey he had just killed. After hitting his target, he would simply turn away. And Layla would always bury the dead birds that were soaked in blood. The beautiful bird slayer. Layla Llewellyn decided to give him that title. Chapter 3. Bring her in. Layla wandered around the cottage, nervously after hearing another sound of a gunshot from the woods. Uncle Bill had noticed her nervousness and wanted to take her to the garden with him. Only when the sound of gunfire faded away did her mind finally calm down. Even though the sun was sweltering hot, the place under the shade of the tree was refreshingly cool. Layla sat down bundled in a blanket with her arms wrapped around her knees. Is it really okay for me to take a nap as Uncle Bill toils away in the hot sun? Meanwhile, Bill and the other gardeners were busy digging up the wilting rose tree. Bill drew an uneasy stare from Layla. She let out a slight sigh as she slowly closed her eyes. But Bill had threatened her that he'd become angry if she helped him. He also told her that he despised children who refused to listen. So, she opted to wait for him until he finished his work, even though Layla's heart wasn't at ease. When she opened her eyes again with reluctance, Layla was suddenly startled by an unfamiliar figure. In front of her stood a well-dressed teenage boy who seemed to be about Layla's age. Hello. As their gazes met, the good-looking boy with platinum blonde hair greeted her with a lovely smile. Do you live here? The fellow boy surveyed his surroundings and asked humbly. Yes, I live with Uncle Bill. Layla replied with her eyes squinted. Mr. Bill? Do you mean the scary gardener guy? He's not scary. Really? He seems like a scary person to me. The boy sat down next to Layla with a tilted head. And you? Do you live here too? The boy chuckled and shook his head when Layla asked him cautiously. No, he said. I just followed my father. He's the family doctor at the Herhart household. He's come to see Madame Norma for a medical checkup. I sometimes come here with my father. Madame Norma said she was okay. I see. How old are you? 12. Same. But you're kinda tiny. The boy who was looking at Layla started laughing and Layla's cheeks began to blush bright red with anger. You're tiny too. Well, I'm the tallest student in my class. To show his tall stature, the boy stretched out his body. Certainly, he seemed to be a couple of inches taller than his actual age. However, you're still not as tall as Uncle Bill. Layla muttered to herself, causing the boy to giggle once more. He seemed to be a cheerful kid. Hey! Finding a child or even an adult taller than Mr. Bill is impossible. I'm not so sure about that. For no apparent reason, she wished the boy would get up and leave immediately, but he showed no sign. Layla then shifted her attention to the peach poised on the blanket's edge, and asked the boy at the spur of the moment, Do you want some? As the boy smiled and nodded happily, Layla dug into her leather pocket and took out a small knife. The sight of Layla carefully cutting the peach made the boy chuckle. You're funny. Why is a knife coming out of a girl's bag? Don't laugh at me. Uncle Bill gave it to me. As she handed the half-cut peach to the boy, Layla drooped her nose slightly in annoyance. But the two children's noses were tingling with the delicious smell of the peach fruit. How come you have such a sad look on your face? Has something happened? After gulping down his peach, the boy asked her gently. The Duke and his friends keep hunting down the birds in the woods. Layla answered solemnly. The young boy cocked his head, perplexed by her words. So, what's wrong with it? They are killing birds for their own pleasure. Isn't hunting like that? Do you think so too? Layla stared at the boy with her grim green pupils. In her eyes, the boy seemed to have difficulty holding the big, long hunting rifle. No. The boy quickly shook his head. I don't. It's cruel. Hearing his positive reply, Layla's face started to light up with a smile. Do you want another peach? Layla asked with a more bright tone. The boy's cheeks appeared to blush as he tried to fix his tight collar. Layla halved another peach and gave the larger half to him. Kyle, Kyle. The sound of a faint voice could be heard. The boy who had been fiddling with a peach seed hurriedly leapt to his feet. I have to go now. Okay. Bye then. Kyle Etman. He raised his hands. It's my name. What's your name? Layla, I'm Layla-Llewellyn. Layla gave him a clumsy handshake. The two shook hands with their tiny hands soaked in sticky peach honey, as if they were making a truce. Bye, Layla, see ya. Next time, I'll get you something more tasty. The boy shouted aloud as he ran away into the distance. Layla just gave a slight wave because she wasn't sure whether she'd see him again if she moved out of the estate. Layla jumped out of her seat, packed her bag, and picked up the blanket from the ground. Uncle Bill, I saw a kid. Layla was about to tell the story of her meeting with the boy with whom she had shared her peaches. However, at that moment, she was interrupted by silhouettes of people coming out of the forest on the other side, who turned out to be Duke Herhart and his friends. Matthias came to a halt in the middle of the rose garden. Bill Remmer, the brusque gardener who was nearby, bowed his head towards his master. Matthias didn't take long to notice that the gardener was hiding a small child behind him. It's been a long time since we've seen each other, Mr. Remmer. Matthias gave a slight nod. His friends who had accompanied him in the hunting expedition ground came to a standstill behind the Duke and maintained their distance. For the time being, she'll be staying here at Arvis. Bill Remmer told the Duke with a somewhat uneasy look on his face. Layla took a hesitant step towards the Duke after. Bill tapped her on the back and ordered her to come forward. Matthias was able to recognize her because of her glimmering blonde hair. It was the little girl he had almost shot. The weird little girl who was almost killed because she had been mistaken for a bird. I already have Madame Norma and Madame Ellis's permission, but I think I should also ask for your approval. Bill Remmer bowed his head once more, and Layla, who stood beside him, followed suit. Matthias took a long, good look at the girl. The child scowled at him when they exchanged glances. Lips clenched combined with sneered green eyes. Her expression was the same as when they had first met in the woods. You're that girl, right? He asked. The little girl who lives in the woods. Lelia's face blushed with embarrassment and she hid behind her uncle's back. Reet, Matthias' cousin, guffawed from behind. Recalling the girl they occasionally met in the forest was always like that. That girl would always hide behind a tree. As soon as she gazed at the Duke's eyes in wonder, she would always come out of nowhere and bury the dead birds after Matthias would finish hunting. Sure, if that's what you want, Mr. Remmer. With a grin on his face, Matthias gave a quick answer since it was none of his business what the gardener raised in the woods. Thank you, my lord. Bill expressed his gratitude to him. Matthias started walking again after giving Bill a small nod with his chin. After the Duke passed them, Layla flinched when she saw Matthias. Servants following him with their hands full of hunted animals. Her shoulders hunched and she drew her eyes close at the moment when her tiny nose was filled with a strong, distasteful smell of blood. Standing beside her, Uncle Bill only could pat Layla's frail shoulders with his big warm hands. With her chin resting on the palm of her hand, Claudine let out a long, deep sigh. Her curly brown hair danced along in sync with her endless sighs. Claudine, behave like a lady, please. Raising her thin eyebrows, Countess Brandt cast a look at her daughter. Her inarticulate voice became increasingly impatient. Claudine was about to become the Duchess of Arvis, despite the fact that she was much too young to be called a lady. Countess Brandt could only let out a heavy sigh, looking at her daughter's childish attitude. But I'm so lonely and bored. Claudine muttered something under her breath. The other noble women at the tea table, who were drinking tea, turned their focus to the depressed, brown-haired girl. Then go play with your cousins. Countess Brandt wheezed with her face reddened. Claudine, on the other hand, paid no attention to her angry mother. They treat me as if I'm not here. They say things I don't understand. Claudine's annoyed expression elicited a soft smile from other ladies. Well, it can be boring. Claudine doesn't have any friends her age. Elise von Herhart nodded her head while stroking the white dog on her lap. See, Madame Herhart is the only one who understands me. A bright smile rose on Claudine's lips when she met someone who understood her distress. Anyways, who's that child? Claudine abruptly pointed her finger towards the garden after catching a quick glimpse of a young girl. Claudine gestured to the ladies to turn their heads in the direction she was pointing, to a young girl who was taking a stroll with a gardener. "Do you mind if I play with her? I think she's about the same age as me." "Well, isn't she an orphan from another country? A girl like that isn't suited to be friends with you." "I'm perfectly fine," Claudine said. "It'll be more fun playing with her rather than a puppy." She spoke with a calm and confident tone. Her mother's red face, which was about to burst with embarrassment, went unnoticed by her. Alice von Herhart smiled and rang the doorbell cheerfully. "Bring that child here." A maid came to the room at the call of her master's bell. "The child who's being raised by our gardener." Layla was taken to an unknown world by the maid, to the place where glamorous people sat under the shade of the white mansion, dressed in bright-colored clothing. "Oh, she's so cute." Layla earned a compliment from one of the ladies. "Can you tell me what you think, Claudine? Do you like her?" After questioning Layla, the black-haired woman turned over to the chestnut-haired girl sitting beside her. Claudine smiled and nodded happily. "Thank you, Madame Herhart." The maid took Layla's hand and walked her into a room after one of the ladies murmured an order. For the first time in her life, Layla was washed in a luxurious bathroom, and to her surprise, she was clothed in soft, white dresses. Layla sensed the pain as the maid combed her frizzy hair roughly, but she endured it, because she was afraid she would hinder Uncle Bill's job if she said anything wrong. Lady Claudine is Count Brandt's daughter, so don't act rashly in front of her. Do you understand? Layla gave a befuddled nod when she was sternly alerted by the maid, who dragged her up to the second floor of the mansion. After that, the parlor's door was carefully opened by the maid. There, Claudine welcomed them with a refined manner. "Hello. What's your name? And your age?" Claudine lowered her head and tried to look Layla in the eyes. "My name is Layla Llewellyn. I'm 12 years old." "Really? Because you're so tiny, I thought you were younger." Although Layla disliked being called tiny, she decided to keep her annoyance to herself. For Uncle Bill, she was able to calm down as she chanted those words over and over again, almost as if they were a ritual. Flower arrangement, piano, and music. Claudine suggested this and that, but Layla couldn't do anything. Dice game, word game, chess. Claudine's other ideas for alternative games were the same. Claudine's mouth curved into a vague smile, as she alternated between looking at the toy table and at Layla. "Poor you." She slowly rose from her chair with a disappointed sigh in her voice. "You don't know a thing." Layla was humiliated even more by her gentle voice, which seemed to be trying hard to not convey even the slightest hint of disappointment or irritation. Claudine turned away without waiting for Layla to say anything. "Geez, she's no better than a dog," she whispered aside to herself before closing the door. Layla was left alone in the beautiful parlor after Claudine had left. She was tempted to leave as soon as possible as well, but Layla decided to wait because she thought Claudine would come back. But Claudine didn't return until the afternoon sun began turning into a golden hue. The maid who had brought Layla only showed up later in the evening. "You may go back. The lady said you can keep the dress, and this as well." Layla froze in place when the maid gave a glittering gold coin to her, so the maid shoved the coin into Layla's hands. "Just take it. You should be thankful for what your master gives you. Do you understand?" Chapter 4. After a long time, Layla stepped out of the mansion, just as the sky began turning a rose-tinted color, and was welcomed by a soothing wind as she exited the rose garden entrance. Layla walked confidently, clutching a gold coin in her right hand. Her bold steps, however, didn't last too long when she saw Claudine sitting under the pergola near the full-bloom flower roses. The brunette-haired girl was having a fun conversation with her cousins, and she gave a vague smile when her gaze fell on Layla's.
"Goodbye, Layla."
Claudine was the one who greeted her first. The young men sitting next to Claudine all looked at Layla with their gazes drawn to her, but thankfully, Duke Herhart wasn't among them. So Layla quickly replied with a single bow to her farewell. But Claudine remained silent. After she was out of their sight, Layla began to run. She couldn't wait to escape from the weird and unknown world and get back to Uncle Bill's cottage as soon as she could. But it seemed her worst misfortune came at the very last moment. Layla tripped at the crosswalk of the garden and the forest path. Her gold coin mockingly rolled down the paving stone and landed on the tip of a man's shoe, and the man lightly stepped on the coin with the tip of his shoe to quell its tinkling sounds. Layla moved her eyes slowly to the well-polished shoes, up to the long legs, and finally to the man's face that loomed upon her. It was Duke Herhart. Layla startled and immediately sprang to her feet. Her white dress had blood and dust stains from her scratched knee. With a composed expression on his face, the Duke clearly stared at Layla with his red lips, which seemed to be slightly curved to one side. Layla pressed her lips together and brushed the dust from her clothes. Meanwhile, Duke Herhart took a leisurely step back. Then the coin under his foot shone brightly, reflecting the sunshine. Layla hunkered down her body in front of the Duke, even though she wanted to leave the place right away. Just as she was about to stretch out her arms to take the coin, she remembered what she had been told by Claudine.
No better than a dog.
Those words had scratched a deep wound in Layla's heart. She took the coin and politely bowed to Duke Herhart. Layla didn't dare to lift her head, so all she could do was stoop her head as low as she could and hold her breath. As she bowed, surprisingly, the pain she felt when she fell was no longer there. Layla left the Duke and continued her run. Because of her injured knee, she couldn't run as fast as she could before. At the same time, she kept pushing her bloodied legs. She felt something sprouting from the bottom of her heart to the tip of her throat. Layla realized what it was after passing through the forest path and facing the light from the cottage. It was sadness.
I'll give this for you, Uncle.
Bill's hairy brows grew to wrinkle when Layla put out the gold coin to Bill in a hushed way.
What's this?
A gold coin.
You think I don't know that?
Lady Claudine gave it to me.
Claudine. Ah, that little noble lady.
Bill showed her a friendly nod as if he recognized her. Layla had been feeling down for the next 2 days. Ever since she was invited to the mansion, she didn't talk to anyone or go for a walk in the woods or the garden. Bill realized he missed the good old days, especially that child's upbeat attitude. Since the child was silent, the world became quiet. And he wasn't a fan of the quiet world.
Can you tell me why you want to give me that money?
Layla sat in a straight pose, facing her dear uncle, while Bill leaned a little towards the table.
Because I think it's worth a lot.
It's worth a lot?
Even though receiving this coin made me sad at first, I couldn't possibly throw it away because of its high value. So I thought that if I gave you this coin, I might at least start repaying you after being indebted to you for so long.
Damn it!
Layla flinched mildly at Bill's harsh mutter, but she didn't seem to mind his curse. Bill had been concerned about the nobles, hurting Layla's tender heart, ever since she arrived in Arvis. Since all the aristocrats were the same to Bill, he had expected that they would bully the child because of her low status. The majority of them were arrogant, rude, and insulting. Bill was afraid of making the child shed tears if he asked what had happened at the mansion, but he had a good idea of how badly the child was treated there.
Layla.
When he called her name, Layla gave a childish grinning, despite her best efforts to act mature for her age.
Since you earned the money, take it.
The money I earned.
Yep, it's the money you made while working. It's a pain in the neck to deal with a bored aristocrat. You pulled it off, so you can confidently claim your prize.
Layla's brows furrowed in bewilderment. Bill gulped down the thick glass of beer in front of him, while gazing at the pondering child.
Really?
Layla tapped on the gold coin with her head tilted.
That's right.
Bill cleaned the beer from his beard with the back of his sleeve.
The money I earned.
Layla's expression became noticeably brighter. Bill cut up a large piece of meat and set it on her plate.
Welcome to the adult world, Layla.
Adult? Me?
Well, you're considered an adult if you can make money on your own. That's exactly what you did.
But I just made 1 gold coin.
In this world, there are plenty of adults who can't even make a buck. So far, you've had a good start. You're going to be a pretty good adult because you're off to such a good start.
The long days had passed, and it had been during those long days that Bill mused the reasons why he couldn't raise Layla and where he could send Layla, the lovely but troublesome young girl who came out of nowhere in his life. Layla grew a lot during those days of Bill's relentless wondering. The new clothes he had bought for Layla were getting shorter, and her smooth white calves were starting to show. The warehouse-like room that Layla was supposed to use as a temporary residence became a ladies' room at one point. The troublesome child who used to hop around the woods trail grew into a finely matured lady, who now crossed the same track with gentle steps as if gliding on water. Bill was seated on a chair underneath the porch with a puzzled look on his face, when a young lady with a willow basket full of raspberries was waving at him.
Uncle, you're back early today.
Layla lightly ran towards him as if she were dancing. Her pretty blonde hair, which was braided into a single hairdo. Her 2 red cheeks were as fresh as the roses Bill had recently planted, swayed under the wide brim of the straw hat.
You must have gone to the woods again.
Yes. Look, it's a great harvest, isn't it?
Layla proudly held up her willow basket.
I'm going to pick some more tomorrow. I'm planning to make a lot of raspberry jam.
Are you planning on starting a business or something?
That's not a bad idea.
Layla sat beside him in a chair with a bright smile on her face. Layla dropped the basket on the floor and started digging through it until she found a wild peach that she picked in the woods. Bill took the peach she was giving out to him. Then he cut it in half and handed the half-sliced peach to Layla. While eating their peaches, the two sat next to each other and watched the forest. The birds chirping from afar sounded as clear as Layla's voice, and the noise of leaves blowing through the clear blue sky charmed their ears.
It's summertime again.
Bill muttered unknowingly and cracked up laughing when he discovered the old leather bag that ran below Layla's knee, recognizing that it was the first item he gave her the year she arrived.
Are you going to carry on with this old thing until it's worn out?
I like it because it is comfortable to wear. It's still useful.
Her bag shook with care as Layla lifted it. Bill was able to pinpoint the source of the rattling noise. Tin pencil case, pocket knife, old notes, some beautiful feathers and flower petals. She didn't change much in certain aspects.
Kyle will be here the next day, she said. We're going to have dinner and study together. Are you fine with that?
Layla asked while placing her delectable-smelling plate on the table.
Why does that rascal keep coming to my house to eat when he has a rich father who provides him with enough food?
I know you like him, even though you speak of him in that way. Unfortunately.
Layla casually chuckled as Bill expressed his dissatisfaction. At the end of a lovely meal, the night grew deeper. After cleaning dishes, Layla returned to her room and took a warm shower. She was sleepy, but she chose to sit at her desk and switch on the lamp. An exam loomed in the coming days in her summer vacation. Joy hinged on the result of that exam. The sound of her pencil making marks on the paper was mixed in along with the sound of nighttime birds chirping, which was carried down from the night breeze. Layla, who had been focusing on her studies for quite some time, finally let go of her pencil, unable to handle the eye pressure and faint headache that came over. She had to squint her eyes to see clearly ever since she was a kid, and now, her eyesight, which had never been very good to begin with, seemed to have worsened. 20 bottles of raspberry jam. No. Should it be 30 bottles? Anyways, a bit more. She was almost on her goal of buying a pair of glasses. And though her problem should have gotten settled by telling Uncle Bill, she was afraid of burdening him. He was already giving her too many things, and she wasn't willing to repay him back with just money. The majority of people laughed at Bill when he said he'd send Layla to school. They told him there was no point in schooling an orphan child, and sneered that when she got older, a kid like her would wind up being the maid of the Herhart family. Bill, on the other hand, was adamant in his decision. Every day, he spoke with Layla, telling her that she would be a pretty smart woman. After Layla closed her eyes, her headache subsided a little. Strange thoughts began to fill her. Hollow head that the return of the birds in the woods, her summer's plans, the mastermind behind the series of a famous mystery novel, published in the daily newspaper, and Duke Herhart. Layla slowly opened her eyes as soon as the name came to mind. Beyond the familiar darkness, she could see the scenery out of the window. Fluttering branches, the moon and stars, and the night sky sparkling above those trees. Layla caught her breath silently as she blinked at the dim white light from afar. After completing the Royal Military School, the Duke, who had graduated from college, was commissioned as an army officer in keeping with family tradition. He hadn't visited the estate in many years, due to his assignment to the frontier overseas. So it had been a peaceful time for both Layla and the birds in the forest. But he was scheduled to return this summer. Master of Arvis, Duke Herhart. That marked the end of 12-year-old Layla. The Duke was back, and Layla was an adult. And the real story would begin now.